Good morning. It's good to see everyone this morning. Hope you had a good week, and it's good to be together this morning. If we have visitors, want to welcome you. It's always good to have you here. We finished up last week pretty much a study of the letter to Galatians, and I want to start a couple of weeks study here that I will be teaching for 2 more weeks, and then David Crawford will be teaching for a week, and I think someone else will be assigned to teach for a while. So I appreciate your input and the discussion we had and the study we had of Galatians. I think we had a good study and covered it well, so thank you for your input. I know there are a couple in our class that are sick or having some health issues. Ernie Foster, I saw in the flyer there, was having some mini stroke issues, and then I think Euless has surgery scheduled, or has he already had it?
No, it's a week on Tuesday.
Okay. Okay, all right, so it's sort of a COVID protocol, I guess, to stay out of a crowd. Okay, so a week from Tuesday, then Euless will have surgery on his shoulder. Anyone else we need to mention in prayers? David?
I had that rotator cuff surgery a little week ago, and it's been painful, but I'm recuperating.
Good. So David had rotator cuff surgery? Yeah, good. They say it's very painful, so I think the physical therapy is some of the most painful part of that. So, all right, anyone else? All right, would y'all bow with me? Well, let's have a word of prayer. Father, we're grateful for a beautiful day that you've made, and we're grateful for this morning, and we're grateful for the time that we have to come together and study together. Father, we ask that you be with us as we study together, that we apply what we learn to our lives, that we go out and be good examples to those in our workplaces and our communities each day. Father, we've mentioned several that are sick. We ask your special care and blessing on them. If it be your will, you restore them to their health. We ask you to be with those of the entire congregation that we may not have mentioned, that if they need your care physically or spiritually, that you bless them. Father, we're grateful for the opportunities that you give us. We're grateful for the opportunity that you give us to teach. We ask that you be with our teachers this morning at all of our classes, and we're grateful for their efforts, and we ask that you bless them and bless their families as they try to teach your word. We ask you to be with us this week as we go out. Help us be good examples to each one around us, and be good stewards of what you give us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So several years ago, and I'll use the word years because it may have been 5, we were in a class in the chapel, and I think that Elijah was teaching that class actually, and the question was asked, what word would you use to define Christianity? If you had to pick a word, what word would you use? And so there were a number of different words, and I don't think there was really a wrong answer, but the word love was used, the word kindness was used, the word heaven was used. All right, so all of those I think are very synonymous, and I had a little bit of a different word, and the word I chose was forgiveness. Forgiveness. So I want us to do a couple of lessons on forgiveness. And so years ago, I don't remember, Angel, you help me out. One of us ordered or bought a book called The Greatest Psychologist Who Ever Lived, Jesus Christ. And in this book, it had probably, I don't know, maybe 100 stories about people and their issues. It was written by a psychologist, and he had used the teachings of Jesus to help the people that came to see him with their issues. And in reading that book, I would say probably half of the stories, the solution or the problem was people couldn't forgive, or had not been forgiven, or guilt. Those were the 2 reasons that people were going to see this psychologist, and he was using biblical principles to help them understand how they needed to get through their issues. But their issue really was their inability to forgive, they hadn't been forgiven for something or guilt over that. So I'd like for us to look at a couple of passages. We're going to go way back into the Old Testament, a little bit maybe unusual stories, at least one of them about forgiveness. So let's go back into Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. So there is a saying, and the saying is that the greatest gift that you can give yourself in this book, the greatest gift that you can give yourself is to forgive. All right? Is to forgive. And I think, and I'll add mine, the greatest gift that you can give to someone else is forgiveness. Is forgiveness. Have you ever done something to someone or in some situation, you recognize that you had done something wrong, and you went to that group or that person and said, I've done something wrong, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And you don't get forgiven. Helpless. Helpless feeling, isn't it? All right? So let's look at a couple of examples. In Genesis chapter 25, a story we know very well, the story of Jacob and Esau. All right, so we're going to try to lay the groundwork a bit, and I know y'all all know this story very well. You know, I remember it back when I was 2, as early as I can remember, the story of Jacob and Esau. And, being a person that's always enjoyed the outdoors and always enjoyed my time in solitude with the outdoors, I always related to Esau a bit because he enjoyed the outdoors. Not the best person to relate with a bit, but I always thought the story was neat. So let's go back and look at this. And I'm going to start down in Genesis chapter 25, verse 19. Genesis 25:19. It says, "This is the genealogy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, 'If all is well, why am I like this?' So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.' So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, he was like a hairy garment all over. So they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob." All right, so we have the setting of the story. All right, and so we see that Isaac was up in years 40 when he married Rebekah, and then, what does it say, how old was it when the kids were born? 60. How fun would that have been? Having kids at 60. All right, so we see that from the beginning, the situation was a little bit unusual, much like Isaac's birth with Abraham and Sarah would have been. All right. So what does it say about the relationship between the mother and father and the children? Which one did Isaac? And if I get names messed up here, I've studied two lessons this week, so I may get back and forth on names a little bit. Forgive me if you will. So which one did Isaac think the highest of? Esau. And for a reason, he liked the food that he brought, right? As one reason. I'm sure there were other reasons. And what about the mother? What about Rebekah? Jacob, right? All right, so we have this already situation. As parents, is it ever good to have favorites? So we only have one child. Now, I'm the youngest of 8 children, and we always had a lot of fun with Mom's favorite. We have my brother John, that's the nearest boy to me, he's still 9 years older than me. We always called him the golden child. And he could do no wrong, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good for John, but we see that same situation here, only the difference is the mother had a favorite and the father had a favorite. Anybody know what the word Edom means? All right, so we're going to see that Esau is going to become a nation or a people, and it's Edom, the Edomites, and the word literally means red. So we get a lot of symbology in this story, as all Old Testament stories have their types, and we'll see some of that here, but we just that word Edom means red. Okay. Any thoughts? All right, so let's go down and look at. I'm ready to read a little bit. Let me read on down just a little bit farther. We'll continue reading, starting in verse 29. It says, "Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I am about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me of this day." So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. All right, so we see that, what is another saying here at the end for Esau despised his birthright? What would that mean? He disregarded it is another word that can be used. What is the principle or the point of that? Just because he was the oldest. All right? The oldest was to inherit. He was entitled to it. But what is Esau saying here, really? To me, I think he's saying, it has no value to me. I just want something to eat. I'm not interested in having the birthright. He's sort of giving it away as it's just not important to me. And I think we see a lot about the nature of Esau with that. I'll never do that.
And that's sort of the mindset of Esau. I mean, this is something that's going to happen way down the line. I'll even get around with that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, and that David makes a good point that when you're younger, and we see that with people in the job that I'm in, retirement was important, and we are on the same retirement as the state retirement system with the Power Board. The people that we hire today, and you talk to them about retirement, it just isn't as important, sort of the same mindset as Esau.
I think we see somebody living in the moment, and that is so applicable to today and the way people live their lives. They live it for right now. They don't take a lot of consideration for afterwards. So to me, that's a prime example of what not to do as a young person.
Think of the long-range plan. Yeah, make a plan and stick to the long-range plan. And then, as we will see as we go through the story, Esau is going to give up a great deal. A great deal. We can discuss. Yes, I'm sorry.
I have to believe that Esau knew that it wasn't just a physical inheritance. He knew Abraham and Isaac both, and they taught their children about the promise God had made.
Yeah.
That this wasn't just getting half the sheep and half the goats.
Yeah.
It was a lot bigger And he just didn't care about spiritual things.
He didn't, and Esau couldn't look far enough ahead, and then just seemed to have no interest in the responsibility of it, I think, somewhat, of what all it inquired. The head of the household at the time, or the person receiving the inheritance, would have been head of the clan or head of the group, the father of the whole group, and Esau doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in that.
There's a lot of questions in this, answers we'll never know. I think it's odd that Rebecca knew about this, but did Isaac know about it? And is there a difference between him having this and the blessing that he was going to receive? And the reason I bring this is because they were always accused of Jacob of stealing the blessing, but you can't steal something sure.
Yeah.
And so if a blessing and this was all the same, one and the same, then Jacob stole nothing. He had to do some stuff to obtain what was his, but they're different things, and maybe he stole something.
And if we go back, as we continue through the story, we'll see that I'll get these names wrong. Rebecca knew that she had been told that, she knew that there was something different inside her, and from along the two struggled together. And so, she knew there was something going on. I would say, just speculation, I don't think we have anything. It would be hard for me to believe that for all these years, or all this period of time, I shouldn't say years, 9 months at the most, that she was carrying the children, that she wouldn't have said to Isaac, that, this is what I understand, that the older will serve the younger. That there is contention going on here. Now, she may not have, and as we see the story, either way, it's, one of the points I want to make, even if it's God's plan, is there's a great deal of deception. Great deal of deception. Esau, even though it's his nature, and it's what he sort of gave up by selling his birthright, he also was very deceived. Okay? All right? So let's go back and look at, or go forward and look at chapter 27, verses 26 through 29. So this is really the blessing. So David mentioned a blessing and a birthright. Anybody think of a difference between a birthright and a blessing? And it's already really been said. The birthright was just the natural way things happen in the sort of the hierarchy of the people, that the oldest son would inherit the things, and the blessing was more like a last will, or a last will and testament, that the father at the time, somewhere before he died, would say, here's my blessing, and here are the way that I want things, or the way I recommend things to be. All right, so let's look at verse 27, 26 through 29, and we'll see the blessing. And so it says, and he came near, verse 27. Let me back up to 26. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. And when he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. All right, so we see that obviously that Isaac thought he was blessing Esau, but in fact he was blessing Jacob. But either way, the blessing was the blessing, right? And so the blessing went to Jacob. All right, let's continue on reading. Beginning in verse 30, and I'm going to read way down to 44. So here's how this is unfolding. He says, now as it happened, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from hunting. He also had made savory food and brought it into his father and said to him, Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. So let me stop a second. Of course, this is after the deception that had already happened with Rachel, of course. When Esau had gone into the field, Rachel had made, goat skin hair to go on Jacob's hands. And they went in. Isaac could not see very well. Isaac touched the hands, and he said, even Isaac said, you smell like Jacob, but your hands feel like Esau. And so that's sort of to where they got to here. So in verse 31, he also made savory food and brought it in to his father and said to his father, Let me arise and eat of this son's game, that your soul may bless me. And his father Isaac said to him, Who are you? And he said, I am your firstborn Esau. And then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, Who? There is one who hunted game and brought it to me. I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed he shall be blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me also, O my father. But he said, Your brother came with deceit, and has taken away your blessing. And Esau said, Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then Isaac answered and said to Esau, Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac, his father, answered and said to him, Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of the heaven from above. But your sword shall live, you shall live. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. All right, so we see the story going forward. The word Jacob, this idea of supplanter, until I was studying this week, I'd never even looked up the name Jacob. It says Jacob is an Old Testament name which means supplanter, which is often interpreted as someone who seizes, circumvents, or usurps. So we see what Jacob, rightly fitting with his name. In verse 37, let's back up to verse 35. He says, Your brother has deceived me and taken away your blessing. He's taken away your blessing. All right, it's gone to someone else by deception. So I'll ask this, did Esau have a right to be angry? Again, a yes and a no. Maybe.
He gave his right away, but perhaps he'd forgotten about it over the years.
So he gave his birthright away, right? When he was longing for literal lentil stew. I don't know if y'all have eaten lentil stew, but it doesn't sound like. If you look at the drama, Esau seemed to have quite a bit of drama. He said, it won't matter, just give me the stew, I'm going to die anyway. I don't think lentil stew would have sustained him for a real long time, but anyway. So I think that's the difference between the birthright and the blessing. David?
With birthright would come a double portion of everything. So when you consider that Esau had sold his birthright, Jacob was entitled as a result of that a double portion. Then you look at the blessing that Isaac is going to bestow, and if Esau had gotten the blessing, then he would have got the birthright back.
Yeah.
God had said before there was even more, that was not his purpose.
That was-
his plan.
Yeah.
His plan is the elder will serve the younger. And so we're seeing how it brought about. We're seeing the will of God happen.
The will of God happened, and certainly that, no doubt, that's where this is. Terry?
I was on the same track as David was on. I was looking at the passage. I remember it, and I finally found it. Deuteronomy 21:17.
Yeah, a double portion, yeah.
I'd always heard that, but I hadn't looked it up.
Yeah.
I did today.
Yeah, well, good. Well, good. That's good input. So if we look at human nature, if we look at the human nature of Esau, did Esau have a right to be angry? I think by his nature he would have been. It didn't mean he necessarily had a right to be, but by his nature I think he certainly would have been. In verse 37, Isaac says, I have made Jacob your master and given him the possessions. So you can imagine how upset Esau would have been at this point. I think this is be interesting to know. Somebody may have some input about how much later in life this was. Yes?
You see this a lot throughout the Bible, is God frequently will choose the lesser of people, not what you would think he would choose.
Yeah.
For example, David, he had a lot of brothers that were much more physical than he was to ascend to the throne, and yet he was chosen. So,
Yeah. So when God has a plan and wants something to happen, it's going to happen. He will pick the way he wants it to be, and that's the way it will be. All right. Riley?
Traditionally, I think she probably had a right to be upset.
Traditionally, in people, so take away, just put this in a family setting. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit is putting this in a family setting of any family. This would be, we talk about dysfunctional families today. This isn't really good, right? I mean, there's some deception going on. I mean, if one of us were the head of our house and our spouse had brought one of the kids in when we were aged and weren't seeing very well, it wouldn't matter to me what the reason was. I would have felt deceived. Okay? That's just the way I look at it.
The Bible says Esau was a proclaimed man, and that's not a real good mark for somebody.
No.
And I think we see that even here Esau was a proclaimed man, because
Yeah.
I think it's fairly obvious that Isaac did not know about the seven birthright. Rebekah knew, but Isaac didn't know. But when this situation arose, it would have been the thing from Esau done. So now, Father, I want your blessing, but I sold my birthright to Jacob.
Yeah.
But he didn't do it, so Jacob, his part been through it. But Esau, he still raised back, birthright back, is my opinion.
Yeah, I think that the nature of Esau is the downfall of the whole story. It really is, and God's plan that the younger would be ruler. If we look at verse 38, what is Esau's reaction? It says he wept, right? He wept bitterly to his father. Have you reserved a blessing for me? Do I have anything left in the family or in what I will inherit? So let's go down and look at a couple of other verses. Pick up in verse 41 of chapter 27. He said, So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him, and Esau saw and said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. And the words of Esau, the words of Esau's older son were told to Rebekah. Her older son were told to Rebekah. She sent him and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, Surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send him and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved also of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth like these, who are the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? Do you get the impression that Rebekah's about at her wit's end with all of this? I mean, it's all a lot of turmoil within their family. I mean, she's got one son that she wanted to inherit, which was Jacob, that's been given the blessing, but then at the end of the day, she has another son. And he's Esau, and he's weeping, and he's wanting to kill his brother. All right? Not a very good situation. Verse 41, she says, Esau bore a grudge and planned to kill his brother after his father's death. And so he warns Jacob then, what do you have to do? Go stay with Laban. And I'll ask, how did that turn out at the start? Jacob got a little bit of that deception taste himself, didn't he, when he went there with Rachel and Leah? If you remember, of course, he saw Rachel as she was beautiful. He wanted to marry her, and instead, for a period of time, he was given Leah as a wife, which was the custom of the oldest. All right? So she says, why should I be bereaved of both in one day? She's upset. And then, who were the daughters of Heth? Anybody have any? Appears they were the Hittites, and so Esau was going to marry into that, or had married, or was marrying into that family, and I think that's why she makes the comment that, that she's not sure she can live with that, with another one of her sons marrying into this group of people. All right, any thoughts? Yes.
With this business of Isaac giving a blessing and then finding out that he was deceived, I just can't imagine, unless it's some sort of a Hebrew thing that I don't know anything about. I just don't know why he couldn't say, guys, come here. He cheated. I'm taking back the blessing. Goes to Esau.
Yeah.
And don't you do that again. Go to your room. I just don't get it.
Well, so that's the way it would be in our families, most likely, and that's where David makes a good point, that it wasn't according to what God had planned. God knew, and that's one thing that we all know, raising children, is when our kids are born, we think, well, I hope they're a doctor or a lawyer or a physicist or cure cancer or something, and by the time they get through high school, we're like, I just hope they don't get in a lot of trouble. Our expectations sort of change and grow, and I think that it's the same way in this family. I saw a hand go up. Go, I'm sorry.
I don't mean to be trying, but there's a difference between then and now.
Yeah.
That's Rob's question. Back then, the way it was the way it was.
Was.
Today, we think it's always the way around stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's just the same.
Well, that's right, and that's a good point. And then the system that God had set up with dealing with the heads of the household was different at that time somewhat.
It's speculation on my part. I think we have to look back to the patriarchal period. We know from the time the children were in her womb, something was different. She had sought God in prayer, and God gave her answers to some of what was going on.
Yeah.
So she knew, we don't know how many times God may have talked to her, or how many times she prayed to him to get answers, and perhaps some direction. But she did, and she followed through, and ultimately was God's plan to give her.
We know that she appealed to God, and He answered, right? With that, that's right.
The story of Esau and Jacob is perfect. I get commentary on Ephesians 1:5, where it says, having predestinated us to the adoption of children by Jesus Christ. The Bible tells us that God knows every hair on our head, and the predestinate deal is He knows what choices we're going to make. He knew that Esau was going to be profane before he was born. He let the mother know it because she had to be part of the plan to keep God's plan in order. And His plan will be supreme, it will be done. His will be done on heaven and in earth.
All right, very good. Very good. God's plan is going to happen. God's plan is going to happen.
Jump ahead again a little bit. You talked earlier in the lesson about forgiveness, and I think that here again we see the nature of Esau, because when Jacob comes back into the land of Canaan, he goes to a lot of trouble to
Yeah.
Jacob and Esau never got along, but their families never got along. They became bitter enemies.
Yeah.
And because Jacob, Esau would give lip service to forgiveness, but he didn't do it.
Yeah.
If he had forgiven Jacob, his family had nothing to be all against Jacob's family, but that enmity was always there.
Okay. All right. And we will get, that's exactly where we will get to in this lesson. So let's go over to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32, I'm going to start reading in verse 3. And this is about where David just mentioned, Jacob will start reaching out to Esau to see what his brother's feeling is for him after years, after some time. We don't really have a time statement of how long. But in chapter 32, verse 3, it says, Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seer, the country of Edom, and he commanded them, saying, so Edom, where do we got that earlier, right? Esau, that group. And he commanded them, saying, Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dealt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you with 400 men, or with him. So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and the herds and camels into 2 companies. And he said, If Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape. Then Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, Return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of your mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over the Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me with and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So we see that Jacob is going to reach out to Esau to try to find out what his brother's feelings are about him. Think he was afraid? Yeah. I think he was very afraid. Why? And rightly so. He had left and gone to stay with Laban for some time, and now it must have been a pretty lengthy amount of time because he had acquired all this family and all these animals. And so he comes back and he sends messengers out. And how many men does Esau have? 400 men. All right. Joel?
Just above that, chapter 132, it says, And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Wonder if he didn't have a change of heart at that point. Instead of trying to become Lord of all and in charge of all, when he saw the Lord, he realized his place. And now he's decided to become servant and be humble and offer what he has.
Well, I think, without spending too, I think they've been between, and I skipped a little bit in here. Jacob has his wrestling, right? I think so. So we see that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was another one where he wrestled with someone here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
But this seems to indicate, I may have my sources, but when you put that in there, he goes on his way from Laban, and he meets these angels of God. And now all of a sudden you see someone, instead of trying to supplant Esau, now he's putting all the blessings that his father put on him, he's putting that under Esau, which according to Deuteronomy is the proper place.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right.
I mean, but this is before Deuteronomy anyway. But you still see that.
Yeah. So we have Jacob's plea to God here. I'm afraid. I'm going to divide my group of people into two groups, so if Esau attacks, he may kill half of us, but he's not going to get us all. And so we see, I think, the plan and the, Jacob's mindset.
I think prior to this, I think that when we saw Jacob in the land of Laban there, Jacob got a realization it was just him, God, and the whole world was against him, and except for God taking care of it. And I think you see a great reliance on God again back in there, and that's when Jacob really began to prosper.
Yeah.
And he did what the Lord told him to do. The Lord fulfilled his promises, and now he's going back to the Lord's promise.
Yeah, and so I think we see a great deal about God understanding the nature of people, and the nature of Jacob and the nature of Esau, and we see it unfolding here over and over and over in this story. So Esau, he says in verse 11, he says, I'm afraid of Esau. I mean, Jacob's still afraid of Esau. So let's read one more section here real quickly. Verse 13. He said, but Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herd which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let your Lord go ahead before his servants. I will lead on my pace, at which the livestock before me and the children are able to endure. I'm at the wrong place. It should be in chapter 32. In verse 13, it says, so he lodged there that night and took what came to him as a present for Esau his brother, 200 goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, pass over before me and put some distance between success droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong and where are you going? Who are these who are in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he also is behind us. So he commanded the second, the third, and also all who followed the drove, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him, and also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with a present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present went on before him, but he himself lodged the night in the camp. So as we see this story going on, Jacob, he's going to test the waters a bit. He's going to send a group out. But then something else happens, and I'll abbreviate this a little bit. Jacob ends up going first. And I think we see a lot about Jacob's nature in this also, that he's divided his family or his group to protect half of them should Esau attack. And he sends them out as a goodwill gesture. They come back, he has 400 men, and then he says, let's get all of this together. And he goes, and as he goes forward, he leans down or he bows down 7 times to Esau as he approaches him. All right, very contrite in his approach to Esau. And this is even though he, in a sense, had the upper hand or the blessing. Jacob was right in what Jacob had done. He had all the blessing. But I want you to, real quickly, let's look at Esau's response. So Jacob approaches him. Let's look at chapter 33. I'm going to read this real quickly, and then if you need to leave to get kids, please go ahead. He said, now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming with him and 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the maidservants, and he put the maidservants and children in front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over them and bowed them to the ground 7 times till he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, who are these with you? So he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. And Leah also came near, and her children, and they bowed down. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Then Esau said, what do you mean by all this company which I met? And he said, these are the fine favor in sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And Jacob said, no, please, if you have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Look at the reconciliation, and as David says, look at the forgiveness. Look at the forgiveness in Esau. His brother came near, he embraced him, and he wept. Now, I'll say this about this story, as David said, doesn't seem to be any reconciliation. Even though Esau forgave his brother, we know throughout the rest of the Old Testament that they strived with each other. There was constant strife and difficulty going forward, so there wasn't a reconciliation. But at this point, certainly I think Esau forgave his brother. Thank you for your attention and your comments. I appreciate it.